9th of February 2023, he will be 100 years. So, a couple of weeks ago, I didn't know much about Brendan Behan. I knew two phrases that he used. One was that if he had to live his life over again, he'd live over a pub. And the second was, he was in Canada, he seen the sign, drink Canada Dry, he said, I did. But apart from that, the extent of my knowledge of Behan was zero. I got a book 2 to 3 weeks ago, and it's called, two books actually, one was mentioned to me by Connie Sneyd, actually a friend of mine, a musician, mentioned Brendan Behan, The Life by Michael O'Sullivan. He mentioned that some time ago. I had it in my library. Got a book there a few weeks ago called Reading Brendan Behan. I think it's called John McCourt. So I put those two books together in preparation for Brendan Behan, and extracted information that I thought was interesting. So I could just read you some of the stuff that I got from those books, if you like.
Go for it.
So basically, again, reading Brendan Behan discussed the sum that makes up the man, the sum of all his parts. And I'm going to read you the breakdown of the character of Brendan Behan. We all equate Brendan Behan with drink, an alcoholic, a raging alcoholic. He was more than that. As a matter of fact, the book says he was a genius. But I'll read you some of the lovely qualities that he had. And again, some of his imperfections. It says he was a rebel soldier, a house painter, a novelist, a jailbird, a boozer, a short story writer, a chancer, a drinker with a writer's problem, an international celebrity. He was unpredictable, a showman, a world famous playwright, a singer, a poet in the Irish language. He wrote 13 poems, a Dubliner, a gifted scholar, and it just says a genius. But before I move on, I really want to just say that Beatrice, his wife, is here as well. Beatrice was also a poet.
Oh, okay.
From
Great.
middle class, and also Beatrice's grandmother was a poet, blonde at Saltgate, and Beatrice and her son Celtic French Saltgate. They were, so there's actually 4 poets in that grave, including Brendan Behan. So it just says again, as a poet in the Irish language, a playwright, novelist, and a short story writer, it could be said that at one level, all these roles caused him no anxiety. He excelled in all of these, so it just came natural to him, didn't it? The storyteller and the poet. His small but important contribution to modern poetry in Irish has been acknowledged in authoritative publications, including the Field Day and Anthology of Irish Writing 1991 and the Cambridge History of Irish Literature 2006. Behan did say that music and song played a part in his family life. His mammy would have sung songs to deal with every situation in life. It says in all his writings, the use of song was a natural and almost unconscious act. Communicating through music was a vital technique, the extension of a family tradition. In Confessions of an Irish Rebel, Brendan Behan explains, I'm a very good singer, he says, or at least I was, until my larynx gave in to too much gargle. So there we go. That's the music in the family as well, isn't it? Now I will mention his works that we're all familiar with. I'll admit I haven't read them, but that's another day's work. He was incarcerated in the Boston, wasn't he, at age 16, and he also got 14 years sentence for the attempted murder of a policeman, detective in Glasnevin. So the 3 years in Walton Jail and Halsley Bay in the detention centre. But his works, sorry, getting back to his works, 13 poems, The Confirmation Suit, Richard's Cork Leg, The Borstal Boy, The Hostage, and The Queer Fellow, which created international awareness. So he also Behan's most famous lament and most anthologised Irish poem. It's in Irish, but in English it's called A Jacqueline Laments the Blaskets. Now I'm aware that Brendan Behan would have loved the Blasket Islands, Ballyferriter and Dunquin, those parts of Kerry that he loved. And also The Laughing Boy. Now I'm told The Laughing Boy was an expression that his mammy, Kathleen, would refer to Michael. Kathleen was great friends of Michael Collins, as was Stephen, Brendan's daddy. Apparently when Stephen was incarcerated during the Civil War, Michael Collins gave his mammy a fiver. But Kathleen Behan always called Michael Collins The Laughing Boy. Now apparently Brendan wrote The Laughing Boy. So as a child, basically, looking at Brendan Behan, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Consider this, his daddy, Brendan was born in 1923, at the height of the Civil War. At the time Brendan was born, his mammy Kathleen brought him down to the prison and said, there's your son Brendan. Now Stephen was the father. His uncle Paddy Carney wrote the national anthem.
Oh, wow.
His uncle is actually buried in the Republican plot. He's buried with Thomas Ashe, Ireland's first hunger striker, 1918. So the house painter, Paddy Carney, is buried there. He's one of the Abbey rebels as well, the managing director. He worked in the Abbey as far as I know. The mammy, when Stephen was incarcerated, I think Collins found work for Kathleen with Maud Gonne. She worked in the house with Maud Gonne. So it's a good connection there, isn't it, really? And I mentioned Paddy Carney, the national anthem. It was adopted by the state in 1926. I think the state paid £900 for that piece of work as well, didn't they? Again, he was a poet as well. Paddy Carney, not only a house painter, and also would have taught Irish classes in the evening. Now, Brendan's youth again was steeped, as it says, it was steeped in the drama of 1916, surrounded as he was in youth by men and women who never ceased to speak and sing of the 1916 rebellion. At age 14, in fact, his brother Dominic said that Brendan had this desire to go to fight in the Spanish Civil War in 1936, 1937. Now, Brendan was only a child then. No doubt to fight with the same battle that Tommy Woods, age 14. Tommy Woods was from Cabra West. Tommy Woods from Swilly Road, I believe. He fought in Cordoba and died in Cordoba. His mummy's in Glasnevin, and his uncles that would have been his uncle is one of the forgotten 10 that's buried up next to Roger Casement. So at 16 then, Brendan, I believe, took it upon himself to blow up Liverpool docks. Now he was a Fianna, in the Fianna era, and the Boy Scout runner for the Republican movement. But at 16, he was a volunteer of the Republic of the IRA. And he went to blow up Liverpool docks, but he was arrested and got 3 years, as I mentioned, in Halsley Bay and Walton Jail in the detention centre there. And so that's his experience in the Borstal setting there. So basically, the piece that I got from that I appreciate in the book, reading Brendan Behan, it's called The Three Nuns. And he learned the lesson of the three nuns in detention centre. The governor came up, and it's to do with tobacco. And the governor said to him, there's three lessons you have to learn. One is, with regard to tobacco, there'll be none yesterday, there'll be none today, and there'll be none tomorrow. So that's your take on the three nuns and the tobacco. So that's a bit of sense of humour. So he spent, having been convicted of 14 years for the attempted murder of a detective at Glasnevin at the commemoration, 1916 commemoration. He spent his time he got 4 years. During the amnesty, got out after 4 years, but during that time, he spent his time in Mountjoy, Arbour Hill, and the Curran military camp. That's where he learned his Irish poetry. So the Mountjoy, Arbour Hill, and the Curran camp, he engaged in the study of the Irish language, taking lessons from Sean O'Brien, an Irish language scholar. And it does mention another individual called Martin Cadine, O'Cadine. I can't pronounce that. So that's where that was in 19.
Martin O'Kine, I think it is.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
he wrote a very. He's considered like the James Joyce of the Irish language.
Interesting.
You would love his novel. The Irish name is Cranekilia, and
right.
there's different translations of it. But the idea is that all the characters in it are corpses in their graves talking to one another, waiting for new people to come in and get buried so they can get some new gossip.
Sounds fantastic.
Yeah, you gotta learn Irish to read it.
Okay.
They translated it, so.
Right, that's over my.
You
Well, we
should
got the. I
definitely
remember doing Peg Sayers for the Leaving Cert, and I had to do it in English. So I didn't get the grasp of the Irish.
You can read Martin in English.
In English, so. We have a look at that. So it just said then that he went to Paris. He spent I think 20 odd years in Paris, and it just used the expression for personal freedom, literary emancipation, and the psychological space to complete the Borstal Boy and the Queer Fellow. And also in Paris, it says. Over almost 2 decades from 1948 until his death in 1964, Behan enjoyed several sojourns of varying lengths in the French capital, where he met a host of friends. One in particular was Samuel Beckett. So that's another interesting take. Paris was the city in which Behan wrote much of the Borstal Boy and probably the best part of the Queer Fellow. Behan alongside Beckett, both writers shared a sense of exile in Paris, and both had suffered from rejection of their work in Ireland. So the Borstal Boy, I love the phrase and the connection with James Joyce, Ulysses. He says, some people may say that my book, The Borstal Boy, shouldn't be read. Then I say that adolescence shouldn't be lived. Here Behan echoes Joyce's words, if Ulysses isn't fit to read, life isn't fit to live.
That's right.
Both writers ultimately were united in their desire to express in fiction everything that life threw their way. So he was influenced by T.S. Eliot. His grandmother-in-law, and was the modernist poet Bláthnaid Solkid, who, like Behan, came under the influence of T.S. Eliot. Bláthnaid is actually here. You see Bláthnaid. She died in 1958. Her works, she was a poet as well, prose and poet. Her works include Hello Eternity, A Dubliner, and The Fox's Covert. So now, most important, I suppose, really what makes Brendan Behan. I love the piece where in the book itself, reading Brendan Behan is and also Brendan Behan alive, is Beatrice, his wife. That you have to mention Beatrice in Brendan Behan. She was from middle class. Beatrice was a botanical assistant in the Museum of Natural History. Extremely beautiful, fine features, delicate pale skin, set off by her thick dark hair. Beatrice, she knew Brendan to be a hard drinker, but she was captivated by his voice and personality, who promised her diamonds, mink and a house. So any dream she said I had of Brendan were vanishing in the smoke of the Dublin pub. He wrote a poem to her really, and the two verses, I'll read them out to you. He had a love for Beatrice really. When the timid eyes looks at you, fearful and full of guilt, in hope its woeful look will catch you smile across the quilt. Oh, what hopes of reformation, promises to stick the stout, beating breasts in condemnation of late stopping out. So that's a couple of words there that he wrote. I do want to mention, I do want to mention that before Beatrice ever met Brendan, she actually fell in love, and a guy, Ian Stewart from Wicklow, proposed to her. Ian Stewart is the son of Francis Stewart, the novelist in County Wicklow.
Okay.
Francis Stewart married Maud Gonne McBride's daughter.
Oh wow.
Buried in Glendalough in the round tower. That's where Stewart is buried.
Oh, okay.
I just thought that's a lovely connection between Maud Gonne McBride and Beatrice. So before Brendan came on the scene, she was a looker, and that's hence Ian Stewart did propose to her. Beatrice met Brendan in 1954 when they went to see the Queer Fellow in the Pike Theatre. That's where the relationship kicked off. In 1955 they married, and the honeymoon was in Paris, and I'm afraid to say they were penniless in Paris. That's what they did. People had to actually send money across to them, you see. So basically, I'm just coming to a conclusion of Brendan Behan. 1964, his funeral was famously one of the largest and most heartfelt that Dublin had ever seen. The city streets were lined with mourners as thousands of people and paid their respects to a fellow Dubliner who had died far too young. His life was cut tragically short at age 42. So Brendan is well remembered for the works that he done, and I love the piece of work also remembered for switching on the Christmas lights in Parnell Street in 1958. So just to conclude, if I can read you a little extract from Ray Baston's book called The End, and just as regards the headstone itself and the monument there, it just says his death was reported worldwide. His funeral mass was attended to by the Lord Mayor, representatives of the President, the government and the church, as well as the plain people of Dublin. The IRA acted as pallbearers after the mass, and the last post and reveille was sounded. Later after the mourners had gone, the IRA fired a salute over the grave. Brendan's grave remained unmarked for 15 years. An article in the Sunday Press drew attention to that state of affairs, and the Dublin branch of Conrad na Gaeilge decided to erect a monument over the grave as part of the Seachtain na Gaeilge. The sculptor Cleena Cossain created the memorial. So just that piece of work that's called The End by Ray Baston in conclusion of Brendan Behan. So really, it's a lovely take. I just think to remember Brendan Behan 100 years later. To my regret, I didn't know anything about him up to a couple of weeks ago. I'm happy that, you know, how do you think about the take on Brendan Behan yourself?
I think you've done a very, very good job. You know, you've done well by him. I've never read any of Brendan Behan's works, to be honest. I have to confess the same thing as you, that I'm not super familiar with his work, just his reputation. So definitely in this the centenary of his birth, we both need to rectify that.
Do a bit of work. And I really love, just to conclude, I love the phrase that it says that he was a scholar and a genius.
Yeah.
Not just a drinker, an alcoholic or a raving. He was there was a depth of him. There was
I
a
like
literally
that
depth there.
he was a drinker with a writing problem.
Yeah, that's a good one, really. So we all coin simple phrases, but there's more to the man that really isn't it, really. So thanks.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Yeah.
Brendan Behan,
Fantastic.
well recognised.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.